But we begin tonight with a date now set for the first criminal prosecution of a former American president. Of course, I'm speaking of Donald Trump. And that date is April 15th. Mark your calendars. No, it is not one of the two trials for trying to overturn the 2020 election or the one for grossly mishandling classified documents when he left the White House. This one is for falsifying business records to hide the hush money payments Trump signed off on ahead of the 2016 presidential election. Those checks were written by Trump's lawyer, Michael Cohen, to pay off adult film star Stormy Daniels and keep her quiet about her alleged sexual affair with Trump, while Melania, Trump's third wife, was pregnant with his fifth child. Now, I know the idea of Trump getting busy with Stormy Daniels is not the image you want littering your mind at the dinner hour, just like this trial is not the one most people were hoping for. But it may very well be the only criminal case to go to trial before the November election. But that's not to say that it's not an important case, because in the end, it is not a trial about paying off a porn star. It's about lying to the American electorate to influence an election by suppressing negative information about the candidate. Trump paid Ms. Daniels to keep their relationship secret, not from Melania, but from voters. That's why he did it. And remember, the payoff came at a time when Trump was facing harsh backlash to the Access Hollywood video of Trump claiming he could grab women by the you-know-what. At the same time, he was courting once reluctant evangelical voters. And let's not forget that Michael Cohen went to jail, in part for those very payments. So why shouldn't Trump, who was listed as individual one in the indictment of Michael Cohen? Today, on what was originally scheduled to be the first day of the trial, Trump's lawyers failed in their attempts to convince the judge to further delay it or even dismiss it. Judge Juan Marchand was described as appearing uncharacteristically furious as he called out Trump's lawyers for accusing the Manhattan DA's office of prosecutorial misconduct, but providing nothing to back up the claim. Before making his ruling, Marchand added that, quote, "It's odd that we're even here and that we've taken this time." Trump has said that he would be appealing that decision, but the judge said, appeal or not, he expects to see Trump in court next month for the trial. And while Trump may have to finally face accountability for at least some of his actions, he is still catching breaks. As today's hearing was underway, a New York appeals court judge handed him a pretty hefty one, reducing the bond required for his civil fraud verdict and buying him more time. He now has 10 more days to put up a $175 million bond rather than the original nearly $500 million amount that was due today. The appeals court provided no explanation for its leniency. Joining me now is Melissa Murray, law professor at New York University and MSNBC legal analyst. Tim O'Brien, senior executive editor of Bloomberg Opinion and an MSNBC political analyst. And Tristan Snell, former assistant attorney general for New York and author of Taking Down Trump, 12 Rules for Prosecuting Donald Trump by Someone Who Did It Successfully. Thank you all for being here. Let me start with you, Melissa. No explanation from the appeals court as to why they gave him more time. Can you explain?
So this is a 5-judge panel. We don't know what their reasoning is, but it seems clear from the order that they thought that Judge Engoron's order limiting Donald Trump's family's ability to run this company and, of course, imposing that huge $465 million fine was excessive. They reduced that to $175 million, which is exactly the amount that the Trump organization had pressed for in the first instance. And they basically stayed all of the other conditions involving the family's running of the organization, with the exception of the imposition of a special monitor to review all of things. That gets saved. So it does seem like this intermediate appellate court was incredibly sympathetic to Donald Trump. So a win for him today, but not a total win, because $175 million is still a lot of money. He's probably going to have to put up about $200 million in liquid assets or collateral in order to get a bond for this. So he's not out of the woods yet, but this is a significant win for him.
And it doesn't change the underlying rule. He still owes the $455.
He still owes the, again, this is just while he's appealing that decision. Yes.
Does he have $175 million?
He can probably get it. I think he's getting pressed up against the wall right now in terms of what he has on hand that's liquid, that a surety company would feel comfortable bonding because of the collaterals there. They're not going to want to take little bitty pieces of a bunch of different real estate. They're going to want to go after his cash. What's perplexing to me is he already said last week that he has $500 million. After a year ago saying he had $400 million on oath, and then in between those two moments saying, actually, I don't have anything.
Yeah.
And I think in that context, I think the appellate court didn't do a service towards a defendant being clear and honest with the court, even if, and I think the appellate court clearly thinks that Engoron overreached. I think that, you know, they've stayed both the size of the judge, not the size of the judgment, but what Trump needed to put down to appeal.
Yeah.
But they also stayed keeping the boys out of the business and some of the other punitive things that Engoron put in place around the business. So it indicates to me that they felt he overreached. Having said all of that, that's what gets ironed out in an appeals process. They've sort of gotten into the middle of this now and cut away at some of the foundations of both the ruling, and they've signaled what they think about the whole process, and that feels untoward. On the other hand, Donald Trump and people of means routinely get breaks in the judicial process that we average, you know, parking toll violators do not.
Do not. You were practically almost laughing. I saw you. I think you want to say something, Tristan. I feel it in my spirit. So say it.
Yeah, the whole, as you put it, it's, you know, first he had $400 million. He stated that during one of the E. Jean Carroll cases. You know, then in between it was like, oh, I've got nothing. Now all of a sudden it's like, oh, I've got $500 million, and they're trying to take
he
it
has
from
11 billion.
That's
11 billion.
11 billion team.
Yeah, billion team.
Plus one.
Plus one.
Plus one.
Let's talk about where he might be able to get the money. Let's play this. This is, let me just read this. So there is a piece that's called Trump's Media Grift Goes Public. This might be the way he finds the cash. Donald Trump has this thing called Truth Social, which nobody's on but his hardcore fans. It's losing a bunch of money. It's in the red. However, what's unique about this thing of really about to go public is whether it's a short-term play like the Trump NFTs and trading cards, only scaled way up, or a long-term scheme along the lines of the Trump Hotel in D.C., where corporations, foreign governments, and the GOP faithfully opened up their wallets to curry favor with the sitting president. Will Trump dump his shares quickly once this thing goes public and cash out before the whole thing goes belly up? Will he hang on to the shares in hopes that he wins the White House and can then spend 4 years selling high-priced ad space to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, coal companies, and every Republican candidate who knows what's good for him? Which is it? I mean, he could kind of do all this, right? Because it sounds like a pump and dump. Could it work?
Well, to begin with, though, he's locked up for 6 months.
Right.
Once the company comes public.
I mean, but
he gets diluted. So,
right.
So the other thing is his stake is not going to be $3 billion. When, as of tomorrow morning, I guess.
Right.
It'll probably be, I think, $780 to $800 million.
But can't he get? But can't he? He's got 60% of the shares.
The board can tell him he can go ahead.
That he can take it. Yeah.
To get a waiver from the board, though, I think would expose the company to serious liability from shareholders. I mean, again, for the board to waive the lockup provision and allow him to dump the stock.
You're basically putting up a neon sign that says, go sue me in Delaware for shareholder liability.
And there were two guys from The Apprentice who actually started this. If you guys don't know the whole Truth Social story, two guys from The Apprentice start Truth Social. Then it's going to be bought by this sort of shell company. Then that goes public. And then somehow Donald Trump gets $3 billion. This sounds like a pump and dump. Wouldn't you, if you were still New York AG, wouldn't you be prosecuting somebody for this?
Look, I am not, contrary to popular belief, I do not have like a red telephone that connects me to my old colleagues.
I thought that red thing next to you was the red telephone.
You thought this was the telephone.
I did.
It's this right here. I have to believe that they're at least looking at this.
Yeah.
They cannot not be. I just don't.
It's the way he gets the money.
The thing is, I mean, he's using a vehicle, SPACs, without getting into technicalities. They are designed to avoid the normal IPO process, the normal financial disclosure to reassure investors that you're buying into something that has a track record.
Right.
And it's transparent.
It's profitable.
Full disclosure.
Yeah.
And this is a business that's basically built on Donald Trump becoming president, so his posts on Truth will become more valuable.
Yeah.
That's the business model.
Let's talk about this other case, because the DA Bragg case, I think, Melissa, gets short shrift.
It does.
Because of there's like it's Stormy Daniels. It's about, ew, we don't want to think about Donald Trump with a porn star. She also says ew, by the way, Stormy Daniels, and I love her. She's great.
She's earned her money.
Talk about this case, because this is actually the case that's going to happen.
No, I think that's right. And again, I do think it gets short shrift because the facts are so salacious and it's so lascivious. But it is a species of election interference, and Alvin Bragg has consistently talked about it in that tenor, that this is like the lead up to what we see on January 6th. It's the dress rehearsal, keeping information from the voting public in order to maximize or optimize your chances for election.
Right.
And again, to do anything to win. And you see that again happening on January 6th. So again, I think the two cases actually run together, and we dismiss or poo-poo this case to our detriment.
And here's the thing, Tim. I mean, today, one of Donald Trump's fans, I guess we're assuming while he was in court, because our reporter saw him in court, he was not typing, but someone posted to his Truth Social something comparing him to Jesus the Christ. And this is the week before Easter weekend, is this coming weekend. And they compare him to Jesus. And they quote the Psalms 109 in the New King James Version. But I think there's a few lines that they might have missed. It says, let an accuser stand in his right hand. When he is judged, let him be found guilty. It says, let his children continually be vagabonds and beg. Let the creditor seize all that he has. Let his posterity be cut off. In the generation following, let their name be blotted out. Let the iniquity of his fathers be remembered before the Lord. And why? Because he did not remember to show mercy, but persecuted the poor and needy man. Don't mess with a former Sunday school teacher on the Bible.
Amen.
The biggest sin in the Bible is persecuting the poor and the immigrant. To quote that and not actually know the Bible, probably a little bit of an error on the part of his fans.
Lose track of what Christianity is meant to be about. Love and forgiveness. At its core, you know, in the Bible. And they're comparing someone who is not loving, who is not forgiving, who's a vicious racist, and he's trying to torch the Constitution. He is the last person on earth who should be compared to any religious figure, much less Jesus Christ, and I say that as an agnostic.
Today, the United Nations Security Council passed its first resolution calling for an unconditional ceasefire in Gaza. It was a 14-0 vote. Note that I said it was unanimous, 14-0. And that is because, in an astonishing and rare move, the United States abstained. Here you see Linda Thomas-Greenfield, U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, voting to abstain, clearing the way for the measure to pass. The U.S. has vetoed 3 previous resolutions demanding a halt to the fighting, and just a few days ago had presented its own resolution to the Security Council, using the toughest U.S. language yet, calling for an immediate and sustained halt to the fighting in connection with the release of the hostages. It was also the first time the U.S. had used the term ceasefire since the war began. But the U.S. resolution failed after Russia and China vetoed it. Still, that resolution and Monday's decision to abstain are the latest glaring signs of the Biden administration's frustration with Israel's approach to its war on Hamas in Gaza. And it's a notable break with America's long-standing defense of the Israeli government, usually come what may. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who is the source of the Biden administration's frustration, reacted angrily to the U.S. vote to abstain, canceling a high-level delegation to Washington for meetings with U.S. officials. The meetings had been scheduled to discuss alternatives to a planned Israeli offensive into Rafah, the southern city where more than 1 million people have sought refuge, amid U.S. concerns over the death toll in Gaza, now topping 31,000, and the growing risk of mass starvation. Joining me now is Trita Parsi, Executive Vice President of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, and Nayyera Haq, MSNBC columnist, former State Department Senior Advisor, and former White House Senior Director. Thank you both for being here. Trita, this is a big deal. Explain to us, give us some context as to why it is so major for the U.S. to abstain.
It is a very big deal because we have seen in the last month and a half or so that the administration had shifted its rhetorical position and started talking about a ceasefire, talking about the need for the fighting to end, etc. But we had not seen any real shift in its position. Today, by abstaining to this resolution, which had the clearest demand for a ceasefire yet, we actually saw a change in the position as well. Now, that's not enough, however. It all depends now on the implementation of this. And only the United States and Biden has the leverage to be able to put pressure on Israel to actually follow through and get to a ceasefire. Whether that happens or not remains to be seen, but at least we have taken one step forward in the right direction.
You know, and Nayyera, it is clear that there are political incentives for President Biden to shift his position, obviously rifts within the Democratic base. But also, you know, you and I talk a lot about the rise of the global South. I just want to note for our audience who put forward this resolution. It was the 10 non-permanent members of the Security Council: Algeria, Guyana, Republic of Korea, Sierra Leone, Slovenia, Ecuador, Japan, Malta, Mozambique, and Switzerland. And I want to let you listen to Ambassador Carolyn Rodriguez Burkett, who is Guyana's permanent representative to the United Nations. This is what she said on Monday.
After more than 5 months of a war of utter terror and destruction, a ceasefire is the difference between life and death for the hundreds of thousands of Palestinians and others. For the people in Gaza, there is man-made starvation, and we are already seeing evidence of a man-made famine. All of this when there is food available, but deliberately withheld.
It definitely feels, Nayera, that this is a rare instance, even though it was an abstention of the U.S. allowing the Global South to speak.
Oh, and even the fact that prior to this, South Africa is the country that tried to bring a case against Israel, right? Given South Africa's own history of apartheid and how that language has been used in the Israel-Palestinian context, that was also a deeply powerful move at the UN. The UN was originally created largely to be European powers, right? Western powers having dominance and continuing in a diplomatic way the imperialism that they had presented to the rest of the world for so long. The reform at the UN to even bring in members of the Global South onto the Security Council has been part of that recognition that so much of what is done in the global body impacts people outside of the United States, right? Like the big global economies, the G7, the G20, all of those, ultimately they control the money, but the impact is on the people in countries like Guyana, like South Africa, and in the Global South.
And Trita, let's talk about that, the implementation, because you said the important thing is now what happens next. You've still got a big fight within the United States and Europe against UNRWA, which is a UN agency that has helped to feed Palestinian people. You have what does appear to be mass starvation, perhaps near famine conditions in Gaza. What would you expect if the U.S. is serious about getting a ceasefire that they do next? You still have hostages stuck there, too. There's a lot they still have to do.
I mean, ultimately, nothing is going to change unless Biden is willing to put a halt to the arms sales to Israel. According to an Israeli general, if the U.S. stops sending the arms and the ammunition, the Israelis will run out within 5 days, and then we will have a ceasefire. So far, Biden has not been willing to do so. And I have to say, there was also a missed opportunity in all of this. The fact that the U.S. abstained was so positively received. It was a moment of healing. But then the U.S. turned around, the Biden administration turned around and started saying that this resolution is not legally binding. That's actually factually incorrect. But what it did, it had really created a lot of tensions with a lot of these different countries that saw this as an opportunity to be able to mend fences with the United States, bring the U.S. along for a ceasefire. And then the Biden administration turns around and says that this is not legally binding. And incidentally, that would also mean that the call or the demand for the unconditional and immediate release of all the hostages is also not legally binding. Why would the administration say such?
Let me let you weigh in on that, Nayera. What is going on here? Because it does feel like they're still trying to have it both ways, but there's a clear enough rebuke that Bibi heard it and canceled his meetings in Washington. Your take?
It's the difference between the United Nations being a place of norms and standard setting and bilateral relationships between two countries being where the real action happens, where real change is made. So that's what Bibi is reacting to, the fact that the United States was no longer doing the we support Israel no matter what at the United Nations, where frankly often it is needed given the threats that Israel has faced on the world stage. But on the flip side, Bibi is also facing a hard reality back at home where people, even his own war cabinet, is looking to remove him and make a change to his own war policy. So this extreme reaction of pulling back a delegation from the United States is not really even about the U.S. relationship. It's about Bibi's sending signals to people in his own country that he is still a strong and confident leader.
We are out of time, but it'll be interesting to see if Biden keeps moving in this direction and takes Trita's advice and actually puts some meat on those bones. Trita Parsi, Nayera Haq, thank you very much.
Hey, everyone. MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.